There is absolutely no denying that Doom Eternal is a kick-ass game. In fact, I've been playing it recently. I replayed Doom 2016 and dove right into Doom Eternal. And a big part of why this game gives you that visceral feeling is the incredible soundtrack by Mick Gordon, with that heavy metal track combined with certain hellscape-like sounds that provide the perfect feeling for ripping and tearing. So that's why a lot of people were looking forward to the soundtrack release of Doom Eternal, except that people discover there's something very strange with it. It doesn't sound quite right, and turns out that the mixing was not in fact done by the composer, and the composer is none too happy about the way the soundtrack was released, and fans aren't either. So let's begin by checking out information relayed by news outlet GameSpot, who said Doom Eternal soundtrack did not launch alongside the game in March. It was delayed, and it only just released the week of April 20th, but it's been discovered that something is not quite right with it. And then if we scroll down here, you'll find a comment from Mick Gordon, but before we get to that, let's check out what he's responding to. This is a string of tweets from Twitter user that ACDC guy, who kind of broke down what exactly is wrong with the release of Doom Eternal soundtrack, compared it to music used in Doom 2016, and just from the wavelengths alone, you can see that something's off, where Doom 2016 has all of this dynamic range with the music, but in the Doom Eternal soundtrack, if you check out the wavelengths, it's all kind of flattened out towards the top, and it's just not ideal, and this individual explains why. So this string of tweets reads, here's a comparison between the original BFG division from Doom's 2016's official soundtrack left versus the BFG 2020 remix on Eternal soundtrack from today on the right. Notice how the wavelengths in BFG 2020 form a nearly perfect straight bar versus the original with more definition. Now, maybe you're unfamiliar with audio mixing and you're thinking, okay, there's clearly a visual difference, but how does that translate to what I'm hearing? Basically, when there's more definition in the wavelengths, there's greater dynamic range between the instruments. The AC/DC guy further proceeds to explain that in the case of music, dynamic range gives instruments more breathing room, so to speak. While there are exceptions, in most cases, you don't want instruments to compete with each other for dominance. You want them to harmonize together to create new and interesting sounds. So similarly to how in a choir you want everyone to be singing together, harmonizing together, ensuring that not one person singing too loudly and whatnot competing against each other, you want the same with instruments in an orchestra, and that's just not what's happening with Doom Eternal soundtrack release. This individual continues, so what's happening is that in the left image from 2016, the instruments have greater dynamic range, which is shown from the wavelengths not being as compressed together, giving the instruments that breathing room I was talking about. However, the image on the right from Doom Eternal is not this case. The wavelengths on each instrument have been compressed to the point where they are all playing back at the same volume, with exception to an occasional peak. These heavily compressed mixes were then thrown together and had their combined master volume lowered, which is what creates those seemingly perfect parallel edges throughout. The instruments are all fighting each other, and thus the mix sounds very poor as a result. And for those who don't know, compression in audio is the process of making the loud parts sort of softer and the soft parts louder in order to, I guess, even out sounds. But with music and in an orchestra, you don't want every instrument to be evenly sounding. You want that dynamicism, and that's what ensures the harmonization of all of these instruments, but that's not what's happening here. And he concluded by saying, Mick Gordon is far more talented audio engineer than me. It's not even close, and that's what makes this especially frustrating. I expect much better from him. Again, the music itself is phenomenal, but this mix on the official soundtrack is frankly terrible. So he accused Mick Gordon of just an awful mix that shouldn't have made its way out there, but turns out Mick Gordon was not the one responsible for this awful mix. He responded with, I didn't mix those and wouldn't have done that. You'll be able to spot the small handful of tracks I mixed, Meat Hook, Command and Control, etc. And the AC/DC guy responded with, "My apologies for assuming you mixed the entire album. Your explanation makes a lot of sense. A lot more sense. Nonetheless, my criticisms of the soundtrack's mixing aside, the music itself you have recorded is out of this world and such an incredible achievement." So there was a misunderstanding here, and you might understand why Mick Gordon is upset at this situation. In fact, according to a Reddit user who posted the following screenshot, Mick Gordon may very well not be working with id and Bethesda again after this. Here's a string of texts that read, "Yo, Mick, are you going to be there if id decides to work on another Doom game?" He responded with, "Doubt we'll work together again." And the user responded with, "No, your Doom soundtracks were the bomb." Indeed, there's just something about Mick Gordon's approach to modern Doom soundtrack that is iconic at this point. It's just really, truly incredible stuff. And to see him go would be a detriment to any potential future Doom games, in my opinion. And you can see right here in the comments that people are pretty disappointed at this prospect, but also understand why he is upset. I mean, we're talking about someone who had his work taken and then poorly mixed and put out there, and then now people are assuming that that poor mix is Mick Gordon's, because Mick Gordon's name and signature are on that music. It's his work. And so for that to be tampered with in such a poor way, and for that to reflect poorly on Mick Gordon, I can only imagine how that feels on his end. So yeah, it would be upsetting from an artist's perspective for this to happen to them. And Mick Gordon actually spoke further about this to PC Gamer. He said, "I take a lot of pride in my work. It's all I do, it's all I have, and I pour my heart and soul into it," he told the PC Gamer editor, and then added that he's still trying to understand the situation himself and has no further comment at this time. So that last bit was in regards to inquiries about his relationship with id and Bethesda. Basically, he said no comment. So it's not 100% confirmed that he won't ever work with id and Bethesda, but he suggested that possibility, and now he's just trying to figure out what happened. And hopefully, if id and Bethesda handle the situation correctly, they might convince Mick Gordon to return, and that relationship won't be tarnished, because I do think Mick Gordon's soundtrack really added that much to Doom's quality and feel, and many people will agree that without Mick Gordon's soundtrack, you just wouldn't have that same vibe. And it would seem as though Mick Gordon on some level knew that there was some mixing and changing of his soundtrack that was far from ideal. This is from 2 months ago in a YouTube video titled Doom Eternal 8-string guitar cover. Mick Gordon talked about how, quote, "Fun fact, all those stupid time signature changes are a result of someone from marketing piecing this track together without any musical knowledge." So yeah, this is just a bad look on both id Software and Bethesda's part. They should have consulted with the original composer to ensure the best mix for Doom Eternal soundtrack, but the fact that they haven't done so just kind of baffles the mind and is a bit insulting to the artist himself, whose, again, name is on that soundtrack. And when the poor mix is out there like that, it reflects poorly on his name, his reputation, his work that, again, he takes great pride in. After this story began to spread, the Doom community rallied in support of Mick. So here's a post with over 18,000 upvotes. The headline reads, "Bethesda, you can still do the right thing here. Let the guy finish his work. Let Mick finish his work." Now, his work is finished. It's more that they took his finished work and kind of botched it. So at the very least, let Mick go back into the mixing room, mix the music properly, and re-release that soundtrack in a more appropriate state. And if you scroll through the Doom subreddit, you can see that there's plenty of discussion surrounding this, from the post that I previously talked about to, share the love for Mick, brother, 7.2 thousand upvotes, and, some memes surrounding this whole situation. To close things off, here is a response that the Doom Discord channel provided. This is the only response we have seen on the part of id and or Bethesda. Apparently, according to GameSpot, the moderators apparently told members that it's absolutely understandable that people are upset about the soundtrack. However, they urged people to remain civil and to stay within reasonable boundaries of healthy debate. Now, do keep in mind that the moderators of a Discord channel, the community managers, they're not the ones to blame. They're just the messengers, and people tend to shoot the messenger. But at the end of the day, they can't do anything about the situation. They're just trying to relay what's happening and trying to keep the peace within community forums. At the end of the day, it's somebody at id or Bethesda or both who made the poor decision to mix the track poorly without Mick Gordon's consultation, and that led to the release of a soundtrack that is far from what should have shipped. Much like, I guess, Fallout 76, it's broken at launch. And the hope is that they get in contact with Mick Gordon and properly mix the track, have him there every step of the way, so that Mick Gordon can have the best version of his work out there, so that the soundtrack that's been poorly mixed doesn't reflect poorly on him as an artist. And hopefully that relationship will be patched up so Mick Gordon can return should there be a next Doom game, because his track is just too phenomenal, and it would be a damn shame to have the next Doom miss out on that because of poor decisions on id and or Bethesda's part. But yeah, this is the situation, folks. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the sentiments that Mick Gordon expressed and the state of the Doom Eternal soundtrack release. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.